Peace, my people. Welcome to I Must Be BUGN, where we have honest, relatable conversations packed with powerful insights that spark curiosity and help melanated, gifted, and neurodivergent folks feel seen, safe, and celebrated. Here, labels don't have to feel like pathology, and complexity feels comfortable. Welcome. This is Sheldon Gay, your host. Welcome to the latest recap episode of I Must Be BUGN. I think I'll continue to try to do these for at least a little bit. Let me know what you think. Today's episode, we're going to be reflecting on my interview or conversation with Mark Travis Rivera. So go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. If not, take a few minutes, listen to this, and see if this compels you to go back and check it out. I think it will. But before we get into any of that, as we always do, let's start with a visual description for those it might be helpful for. So again, my name is Sheldon Gay. I use pronouns he and him. I am a Black man in my 40s with black curly hair. I have a mustache, a goatee. I today have on my black over-ear headphones. I have on a black hoodie of my design, which says Decolonize Your Mind. Please do go check it out on my website in the shop section. Behind me, I have a series of some of my favorite books and personal items, including a pillow of my design, which says labels don't have to feel like pathology. Okay, with that, let's get into discussing Mark and his episode. And so again, let me just start with saying, thank you, Mark, so much for coming out. Really have always appreciated each of the conversations that he and I have had over the last several months. Mark is a light amongst the swath of people who are doing this work. And for those of us who are doing the work and some of us who are receiving the work, we know that, frankly, this space can be kind of, frankly, very white, and a lot of white women. And so having folks like Mark who kind of stand, as a contrast, as it were, to a lot of what those experiences are like, and fundamentally is more so about bringing, um, for no pun intended, color to the space, right? To the painting, right? Just adding to the space in a very, very unique way. And this is not just because of how he presents, but also because he's simply a multi-talented person. And, he's also simply a model of the power of authenticity. And this is one of the things that makes Mark and his journey and his story stand out. And so again, I really, really appreciate Mark for coming out and sharing a few minutes of his time to chat with us, during the episode. And as we always do with these recap episodes, I simply wanted to share a couple of key takeaways that I think you should chew on before you go out and hit them streets. And so the first thing that I would say is this conversation about what it means to be a man, right? What is manhood? And frankly, at this point in time, this is particularly relevant. There have been a lot of recent major news stories about domestic violence and, frankly, domestic homicide committed by men, and unfortunately, Black men. And so that has been sitting on the hearts of many of us in this space, right? And so as I reflect upon Mark's episode, one of the things that it makes me think about is not only, his story that he shared during the episode, which I'll talk about in a couple of seconds, but it also makes me reflect upon the panel that he and I sat on a few months ago with not ND Connect, I'm sorry, with Umbrella ND. Sorry, I'm a part of so many different ND spaces, but the panel was talking about what it meant to be, a melanated, I'm sorry, in a neurodivergent space. And so a lot of what we talked about there, and a lot of what Mark brought to the table there as it relates to, again, questioning, can you be a man, for example, as a queer man, right? As a femme presenting man. Is that something, can you still call yourself a man? And yeah, the answer is yes, right? And to that end, the story that he tells during the episode about his cousin, his older cousin, who was, in his words, a macho man, who was the first person to take him to go get his dance clothes. So when he wanted to go and join, this dance class, his cousin took him. And despite the fact that he was, this quote unquote, macho man, and that wasn't really, his thing, he didn't know anything about it. He didn't do what some people may have done, which is, hide outside and say, oh, yo, like, go in there, do your thing. I'm gonna be out here, like, so that nobody sees him in some, store buying a leotard or whatever, right? Um, he also didn't just kind of like just give him money and say, go do what you want to do. No, he showed up, he stood next to him. He went through what I'm sure was an uncomfortable experience for him, if for no other reason than, again, he doesn't know what should or should not be bought, right? And so he stood there by him. And that's what, being a good human is, but it's also a demonstration of what manhood can be. And so, you know, go listen to him tell the story about, his cousin, and, start to, again, chew on what other ways in which we may want to be questioning what manhood, um, could look like. And again, this is particularly relevant right now because there are so many people who are grappling with, so many of us who are grappling with the toxicity of manhood, right? What the patriarchy has put in place, what just poor examples of manhood, and this box, this box that it places, you know, a lot of people in, and how it makes it not just, uncomfortable, but frankly dangerous for others, right? And so having this example that demonstrates, hey, like, this is a counterexample to what many people are kind of seeing at the forefront. And even it's just reminded me of another reflection from another thing that's kind of been floating around the internet right now, which is the entertainer Kev on Stage, right? He was in an interview talking about, you know why he, as a Christian performer, is so comfortable with speaking to LGBTQ LGBTQ folks, right? And why does he kind of support it? Because apparently, as a Christian, he's not supposed to. And so he tells a story about how in his church, in the churches that he's been a part of, this pushback has pushed people away. People who would otherwise be, attending everything, right? Um, who were coming to all the Bible studies, right? But they had one interaction with someone who made them feel less than, and that pushed them out of the church, right? He even told a story about his brother, where his brother, um, was someone who wasn't really into church, didn't really attend, and through this leading with love idea, which, again, Christian, Jesus Christ, I don't know, but leading with love, it eventually led him to be much more involved in the church. And regardless of whether or not you were religious, whether or not you were a Christian or anything of that nature, the simple principle of leading with love, it wasn't enough for people. People, like, really attacked him. And so again, it brings us back to this question of, like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a person? And what does it mean to lead with love? And if these are things that we purport that we want to be doing, then what would we expect the outcomes to be? And how do they bump up against the things that we haven't taken the time to question? And so, anyway, just wanted to put that out there as, again, a key thing that as you listen to the episode, you get a little snippet of. Another thing is that as a disabled man, Mark brought to the forefront, again, that fact that disability and disabled should not be taboo words, right? He isn't afraid to use that word for himself. And, possibly more importantly, he wasn't afraid to push the limits of what most people would have assumed it was possible for him as a disabled person with a disabled body. And as I said, disability should not be a taboo word. I know, listen, with every label, you can choose what you use for yourself. But if someone chooses to use that word for themselves, if that word comes up in conversation, it shouldn't have to make anyone uncomfortable. The reality is that all of us, at some point in our lives, will be disabled, either temporarily or permanently, and some of that may be as simple as our aging eyes. Look, in my 40s, I noticed my eyes. I gotta get reading glasses. Or I have some reading glasses, right? I haven't needed glasses my entire life, right? But now I'm at a point where, yeah, like certain situations, I do need to put my glasses on to see things and read things. And that makes me, disabled. It doesn't make me as disabled as someone else. But the point is that if we simply treat disability as this taboo subject, as it's like, oh gosh, there's just complete brokenness, or, we shouldn't be talking about that or whatever. Like, we can't really grapple with the reality of what the word really means, and then start to make space for the realities and the experiences of those who have been living with it, you know, um, for their entire lives, or in deep and complex ways. I'm sorry. And so again, to be clear, not every body can do everything. I will never be an NFL wide receiver or even a ballerina, right? However, we shouldn't automatically put limits on people because of a label. And I know that neurodivergent people are familiar with being told what we can or can't do based on a label. And it's why so many of us are reluctant to identify with the word, right? And so ableism, whether it's internalized or otherwise, shouldn't limit our opportunities to see possibilities in ourselves or in others. The world is better for the work that Mark's done through dance, and we would have lost that if he just accepted that the world's assumption of no was his no, right? So go listen to the episode where he talks about, his work in dance, and how that's, changed for him, changed his life. Um, then lastly, Mark, again, he's a storyteller, right? And so he shares about the power of stories and how stories offer our authenticity to the world. And so Mark rightfully advocates for the sharing of personal stories. Telling stories is a fundamentally human experience. Before we had, AI videos that made us question every single thing that we see, every single time it pops up. And even before we had papyrus or stone to inscribe things on, we had stories. And so it is a fundamental way in which we transfer information from one person to another, or even one generation to the next. Telling stories of our gifted or otherwise neurodivergent experiences not only helps us see ourselves more clearly and readily, but it also helps our community, who wants to share their capacity and ability to experience joy together, and to find, helps them find us, right? So it helps us not only, see and love ourselves by telling our story, right? It doesn't just help us, live more authentically, I'm sorry, by, saying, hey, here I am, this is who I am, you know, love me, or, take it or leave it, really, right? Um, but our stories also, when we tell our stories, those people who resonate with that story can be transformed, right? Their lives can be changed. And as well, those who are looking for people who have a similar experience can more readily find us. And so that when we're all looking for community, we're all looking for connection, it makes it a lot easier for those people to find each other. And so make sure you go and check out the full episode to truly get to know Mark and his journey. Seriously, recommend it. It's kind of like a weird, shapeless plug, right? But seriously, like, go check out the episode. But yeah, look, if you're looking for help clarifying your story so that you can find beloved community, visit my website, sheldongaysbuggen.com. It's in the show notes. Go there, schedule a call with me where we can discuss making a plan for doing just that. And so, thank you again for listening. And remember these 3 things. Take time today to help a child feel seen. Make sure that you start with your own inner child. 2, don't be clever, be wise. Change yourself and you will truly change the world. And then lastly, as always, labels don't have to feel like pathology. All right. Thanks so much for joining me. Go check out that episode and see you in the next one. Bye. Thank you for joining me on another episode of I Must Be BUGN. I hope you felt seen, safe, and celebrated by what you heard today. Don't forget to visit my website, sheldongayisbugn.com, where you can catch all of my episodes, book me to speak, and check out my merch. Don't hesitate to hit me up on socials either. I'm eager to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and your stories. Remember, this podcast is all about sharing humanized narratives about who we are and how we contribute to the beautiful and necessary diversity of humanity. This is our place to unmask and just be. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe. It helps our people find community. So until next time, stay up and enjoy who you were meant to be. Ashe.